The plane was losing altitude fast, dropping toward the Pacific Ocean. Everyone was about to die. Then the Black Hawk pilots heard something on their radio that made them sit up straight. Ex-Navy SEAL, call sign Reaper, on board Flight 628. I'm taking them down. Wait, what? Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Now, back to the story. In seat 14C, middle seat in economy class, Elena Torres turned another page of her marine biology journal. She wore simple khaki field clothes, cargo pants and a cotton shirt. Her dark hair was cut short and practical, maybe an inch long at most. No makeup. No jewelry. No fancy watch. Nothing that stood out or drew attention. To everyone around her, she was just another passenger. Maybe a scientist heading home from a research trip. Maybe a teacher returning from a conference. Maybe just a boring woman who liked to read about fish. Definitely nobody special. The businessman in seat 14B had tried to start a conversation an hour ago. He was the typical type: expensive suit, Rolex watch, laptop bag tucked under the seat, probably heading back from some important business meeting in Tokyo. Heading home, he'd asked with a friendly smile, the kind salesmen give when they're trying to be charming. Yes, Elena had replied politely, then returned to her journal. Business or pleasure? Research trip. Coral reefs. Oh, that's interesting. What kind of research do you do? Are you a marine biologist or? Excuse me, I really need to finish this article before we land. She'd given him an apologetic smile, the kind that said, I'm sure you're nice but please leave me alone. He'd gotten the message and left her alone after that. He'd pulled out his laptop and started working on spreadsheets or emails or whatever businessmen do on long flights. The flight attendant had come through with the beverage cart about 30 minutes into the flight. She'd offered champagne. This was the international flight, so they had free wine and champagne even in economy class. Elena had declined and asked for water instead. Just plain water, no ice. The flight attendant had seemed surprised. Most passengers on the Tokyo to LA route grabbed the free alcohol. But Elena had smiled and said water was fine. She wanted to stay sharp, even though this was supposed to be a normal flight. Just a simple trip home after 2 months in Japan. Nothing dangerous. Nothing requiring alertness. But old habits died hard. And Elena Torres had a lot of old habits. She tried to focus on the article she was reading. It was about coral bleaching in the South Pacific, about how rising ocean temperatures were killing the reef systems, about conservation efforts and what could be done to save them. Important work. Meaningful work. But her mind kept drifting. 6 months. It had been 6 months since she'd retired. 6 months since she'd left the teams. 6 months since she'd walked away from the only life she'd known for over a decade. 6 months since she'd promised herself never to use violence again. The journal helped. Studying life instead of taking it. That was the plan. That was supposed to be the new Elena Torres. The peaceful one. The one who cared about saving coral reefs instead of completing missions. The one who wrote research papers instead of after-action reports. But that wasn't the real Elena Torres. That was just the version she was trying to become. Commander Elena Torres, United States Navy SEALs. 12 years of service. Specialization in hostage rescue and close-quarters combat. Emergency pilot certification for extraction missions. Advanced trauma medicine. Explosives expert. Languages: she spoke Arabic, Pashto, and Farsi fluently enough to pass as a native speaker in certain regions. Call sign, Reaper. She'd earned that name in Somalia, during a hostage rescue mission that had gone sideways in the worst possible way. A group of American journalists had been captured by militants and held in a compound outside Mogadishu. Intelligence said there were 7 hostiles guarding them. The plan had been for Elena's team to go in together, 4 SEALs, coordinated breach, neutralize the hostiles, extract the journalists. Standard operation. But the team had gotten delayed by vehicle problems. By the time they were ready to move, intelligence indicated the militants were preparing to execute the hostages. They were out of time. Elena had made the call to go in alone. She'd breached the compound solo, moved through 3 rooms in under 2 minutes, and eliminated all 7 hostiles with her suppressed pistol and combat knife. The journalists hadn't even known she was there until she was cutting their zip ties and leading them out. 7 hostiles. 2 minutes. 0 friendly casualties. The mission commander had recommended her for a Navy Cross. The SEAL community had started calling her Reaper. Because death followed her, silent and certain, and if you were a threat to American lives, she would find you. That had been 8 years ago. Since then, she'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, and countless classified operations she could never talk about. Operations in Syria, Yemen, Pakistan, places that didn't officially have American Special Operations Forces. 43 confirmed kills over her career. More than most male SEALs in her generation. She'd become one of the most lethal operators in naval special warfare. She was good at it. Too good. Hostage rescue was her specialty. She had an instinct for it, the ability to read a situation in seconds, to know exactly where everyone was, to predict how hostiles would react, to move through chaos with absolute precision. Her teammates used to joke that she had a 6th sense for danger. That she could smell an ambush before it happened. That she moved like a ghost and struck like lightning. They'd stopped joking after Yemen. The mission in Yemen. The one that had ended everything. The one that still woke her up at night, sweating and gasping. It had been a compound raid, similar to dozens she'd done before. Intelligence said there were 5 hostiles holding 2 American contractors. Standard setup. Her team had breached the building, cleared the first floor, and then Elena had made the call to push through the door to the basement where the hostages were being held. She'd been first through the door, like always. She hadn't known about the explosives. The blast had thrown her backward, through the doorway, back into the first-floor hallway. Her body armor had saved her life. She'd gotten a concussion, some cracked ribs, burns on her hands and face. But 3 of her teammates had been right behind her. 3 men she'd served with for years. 3 friends, brothers in everything but blood. They'd been in the doorway when the explosion went off. The shaped charge had been designed to kill anyone coming through that entrance. All 3 had died instantly. Elena had woken up in a military hospital in Germany 3 days later. They'd told her the mission had been a trap. The intelligence had been bad, or maybe deliberately fed to them by someone who wanted to kill American SEALs. The contractors had already been dead. The whole thing had been designed to lure in a rescue team and blow them up. And Elena had led her team straight into it. She'd made the call. She'd ordered them through that door. Their deaths were her fault. The Navy had said otherwise. The investigation had cleared her completely. Bad intelligence, not bad leadership. No one could have known. She'd done everything right based on the information available. But that didn't change the facts. She'd made the call, and 3 men had died. She tried to keep going. Tried to stay with the teams, to honor her fallen brothers by continuing the mission. But the guilt had eaten her alive. The nightmares had gotten worse. She'd started having panic attacks during training exercises. She'd freeze up at critical moments, seeing that doorway, hearing the explosion, smelling the burning flesh. PTSD. That's what the Navy psychiatrist had called it. Perfectly normal after what she'd been through. Treatable. With time and therapy, she could work through it and return to full duty. But Elena hadn't wanted to work through it. She'd wanted out. She'd submitted her retirement papers 6 months ago. The Navy had tried to talk her out of it. Commander Torres was too valuable to lose. She was one of the best hostage rescue specialists in the entire special operations community. Female SEALs were still rare, and she was a role model, a trailblazer. But Elena had been firm. She was done. She couldn't be Reaper anymore. She couldn't keep taking lives, even when those lives belonged to terrorists and murderers. She couldn't keep making the calls that might get her teammates killed. She'd turned in her trident, the SEAL insignia that she'd been so proud to earn 12 years earlier. She'd packed up her gear, said goodbye to the teams, and walked away. And she'd enrolled in graduate school for marine biology. It had been something she'd been interested in before joining the Navy. She'd grown up in San Diego, spent her childhood at the beach, loved the ocean. She'd always thought maybe she'd study marine life, become a researcher, spend her days diving and studying coral reefs and fish populations. Then 9/11 had happened when she was 17, and she'd decided to join the military instead. Decided to fight. Decided to protect people. Now, 12 years later, she was going back to that original dream. Studying life instead of dealing death. Using her intelligence and focus to understand ecosystems instead of to clear rooms and eliminate hostiles. She'd spent the last 2 months in Japan, working with a research team studying coral reef systems near Okinawa. It had been peaceful. Beautiful. She'd spent her days underwater, surrounded by colorful fish and living coral, documenting species and taking measurements and writing notes. No weapons. No violence. No death. Just her and the ocean and the quiet beauty of life. It had been exactly what she needed. Now she was heading home to California, back to her tiny apartment near the university, back to her quiet life. She'd finish her graduate degree. Maybe get her PhD, become a professor, or work for a conservation organization, or do research for the rest of her life. A normal life. A peaceful life. That was the plan. The plane hit some turbulence, and Elena's water bottle rattled in the seat pocket in front of her. She glanced out the window at the endless ocean below. They were over the deepest part of the Pacific now, thousands of miles from any land. Beautiful and terrifying. If something went wrong out here, there was nowhere to go. No airports. No emergency landing sites. Just water, deep and cold and endless. She pushed the thought away and returned to her journal. Nothing was going to go wrong. This was just a normal flight. In 11 more hours, she'd be landing in Los Angeles, going through customs, catching an Uber home, and sleeping in her own bed. Just a normal flight. The first scream came from first class. Elena's head snapped up instantly, old instincts firing like electricity through her nervous system. Her right hand had already moved toward her hip, toward where her sidearm used to be, before her conscious mind even registered what she was doing. But there was no sidearm. She didn't carry any more. She was a civilian now. More screams erupted from the front of the aircraft. Passengers in economy were standing up, confused, frightened, trying to see what was happening. The businessman in 14B grabbed her arm. "What's going on?" Elena pulled her arm free gently and stood up, looking toward first class. She couldn't see anything from here, too many people in the way, the galley blocking her view, but her instincts were screaming at her. This was wrong. This was very wrong. Then the intercom crackled to life. "Everyone stay in your seats." A man's voice, heavily accented. Middle Eastern, Elena noted automatically. Syrian, maybe, or Iraqi. "We are taking control of this aircraft." The cabin erupted in panic. People screaming. A baby started crying. Someone was shouting in Japanese. The businessman in 14B went pale, his hands shaking. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Oh my God, this isn't happening. This can't be happening." Elena's mind had already shifted into operational mode, analyzing the situation with the cold precision of 12 years of combat experience. Multiple hostiles, the voice had said, "We." At least 2, probably 3 or more. They'd waited until the flight was over the deepest part of the Pacific, far from any possible emergency landing sites. Smart. That meant they'd planned this carefully. They'd gotten weapons through security somehow. Ceramic knives, probably. Maybe 3D printed plastic guns. Those could pass through metal detectors if you knew what you were doing. This wasn't a random attack. This was organized. Prepared. Dangerous. Elena forced herself to sit back down. Her training was screaming at her to move, to assess, to take action. But she wasn't a SEAL anymore. She was a civilian. This wasn't her fight. Let the pilots handle it. Let the authorities handle it. Stay in your seat. Stay quiet. Stay safe. That's what civilians did during hijackings. But then she heard the cockpit door slam open. The sound was distinct even from economy class, a heavy metallic thud that made her stomach drop. That door was supposed to be locked. Reinforced after September 11th. There was no way hijackers could get through it unless they'd already gotten to the pilots somehow. Unless they'd forced them to open it. A second voice over the intercom, different accent, angrier, the pilots are now our prisoners. This plane belongs to us. We are warriors of the true faith, and we will not be stopped. Elena closed her eyes and took a slow breath. No. Please, no. A third voice, cold and calm, we have taken control of this aircraft. In 20 minutes, we will descend into the Pacific Ocean. We will all die together as martyrs, as a message to the Western devils who bomb our homelands and murder our people. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, the other two voices echoed. The cabin exploded in absolute chaos. Passengers screaming, crying, grabbing for their phones to call loved ones. The businessman in 14B was hyperventilating, his face red, tears streaming down his cheeks. Behind Elena, a woman was praying loudly in Spanish. The baby's crying grew more desperate, more terrified. People were standing up despite the hijackers' orders, pushing into the aisles, trying to get away from the front of the plane as if the back would somehow be safer when they crashed into the ocean. A flight attendant, young woman, maybe 25, Patricia according to her name tag, was trying to calm people down, but her own voice was shaking with terror. Elena felt the aircraft's nose dip slightly. A small change in pitch, barely noticeable to most passengers, but she felt it. They'd started the descent already. She glanced at her watch. 2:47 p.m. local time. 20 minutes, the hijacker had said. By 3:07 p.m., this aircraft would be in the Pacific Ocean, and everyone aboard would be dead. 287 people. She'd heard the number during the pre-flight announcements. 287 passengers and 14 crew members aboard Flight 628 from Tokyo to Los Angeles. 301 souls total. All about to die. Elena could save them. She knew exactly how. She'd run scenarios like this dozens of times during her training. Hostage rescue on aircraft, neutralizing hijackers in confined spaces, protecting civilians during combat operations. 3 hostiles, from what she could tell from the voices. 1 in the cockpit with the pilots. 2 in the cabin controlling the passengers. She could neutralize all 3 in under 2 minutes if she moved now. She knew she could. The cockpit hostile first, silent kill, neck break, take his weapon. Then the 2 in the cabin before they realized what was happening. She could use the element of surprise, the fact that they thought everyone aboard was just a helpless civilian. They didn't know about her. They had no idea that the quiet woman in seat 14C was one of the most lethal close-quarters combat specialists in the United States military. Was. Past tense. Because she wasn't that person anymore. She'd promised herself. No more violence. No more killing. No more being Reaper. She was done with that life. She'd retired. She'd walked away. She was supposed to be a marine biologist now, a peaceful person who studied fish and wrote papers and lived a quiet, normal life. This wasn't her responsibility anymore. Let someone else handle it. Let the pilots figure out a way to regain control. Let the military scramble fighter jets. Let someone else be the hero. She'd been the hero too many times. She'd killed too many people. She'd lost too many friends. She was done. The plane dipped again, steeper this time. More screams from the passengers. "We are descending," one of the hijackers announced gleefully over the intercom. 15 minutes until we reach the ocean. Prepare your souls for judgment. Elena looked around the cabin at the terrified faces. For rows ahead, a young mother clutched a baby to her chest. The baby couldn't be more than 6 months old, wearing a little pink onesie with a teddy bear on it. The mother was hyperventilating, trying to comfort her child while drowning in her own panic. That baby was going to die in 15 minutes. She would sink into the cold Pacific Ocean, never getting a chance to grow up, to go to school, to make friends, to fall in love, to live. Across the aisle, an elderly couple held hands. They had to be at least 70 years old. The woman was crying quietly while her husband whispered something to her, probably telling her he loved her, probably trying to comfort her in their final minutes. They'd probably been married for 50 years. Probably had children, grandchildren. Probably had a whole lifetime of memories together. And now they were going to die together in the ocean, their bodies never recovered, their family never getting closure. Near the window, a teenage girl, maybe 16, was sobbing into her phone, trying to say goodbye to her parents. Her whole life ahead of her, everything she was supposed to experience and become, cut short by 3 men with weapons and a twisted ideology. 287 people. 287 lives. Children, parents, grandparents, friends, lovers. Each one a universe of experiences and relationships and dreams. All about to end. And Elena could stop it. She knew she could. She had the skills, the training, the experience. She'd done harder things than this. She'd neutralized 7 hostiles in Somalia. She'd completed dozens of successful hostage rescues. She knew exactly what to do. But she'd promised herself. Never again. No more killing. In her mind, she saw her teammates from Yemen. Saw their faces before the mission, joking, confident, alive. Heard their voices as they'd talked about what they'd do on leave, the trips they'd take, the families they'd visit. Then she saw the explosion. Heard their screams. Smelled the burning flesh and plastic and metal. Felt the crushing guilt of knowing she'd led them to their deaths. She'd promised herself after Yemen that she was done. Done making the calls that got people killed. Done being responsible for death. If she acted now, she'd have to kill again. 3 more deaths on her conscience. 3 more faces to see in her nightmares. Could she live with that? But if she didn't act, 287 people would die. Including the baby in the pink onesie. Including the elderly couple holding hands. Including the teenage girl crying into her phone. Could she live with that? What was worse, killing 3 terrorists, or letting 300 innocent people die when she had the power to save them? The plane dipped again. The hijacker's voice, 12 minutes. Make peace with your God. Elena looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking. That surprised her. She'd thought they would be. She closed her eyes and took one deep breath. Then she made her choice. She stood up calmly, ignoring the businessmen's panicked grabbing at her arm, and started walking toward the front of the aircraft. The first-class cabin was chaos. Passengers pressed against windows and seats, trying to make themselves small, trying to be invisible. 2 hijackers stood in the aisle, holding what looked like crude plastic guns, 3D, printed, Elena noted with the detached part of her brain that was always analyzing threats. They were young, maybe late 20s, with the hard eyes of true believers. One wore a fake business suit that didn't quite fit right. The other had dressed as a tourist, with a camera around his neck that was probably also fake. Both were shouting at passengers in accented English, waving their guns, feeding on the fear. Neither of them noticed Elena as she walked past, heading toward the galley area. Her body language said harmless, terrified, compliant, just another panicked woman heading to the bathroom or looking for a flight attendant to help her. It was a skill she'd perfected over 12 years of operations. How to be invisible in plain sight. How to project exactly what people expected to see. Right now, they expected to see a scared civilian woman. So that's what they saw. In the galley, she found what she needed. The emergency radio headset that flight attendants used to communicate with military aircraft on certain frequencies. She'd learned about these during her emergency pilot training. All SEAL operators got basic pilot certification in case they needed to fly themselves out during an extraction. She put on the headset, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, and keyed the microphone to the frequency she knew Black Hawk helicopters monitoring Pacific routes would be using. Channel 19.5 MHz. Guard frequency for military aircraft in international waters. Her voice was absolutely calm when she spoke. The same tone she'd used 100 times when calling in situations from the field. Ex-Navy SEAL, call sign Reaper. I'm taking them down. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice crackled through, say again. Who is this? Identify yourself. Commander Elena Torres, United States Navy SEALs, retired. Call sign Reaper. There are 3 armed hijackers aboard Flight 628, Tokyo to Los Angeles. They've taken control of the aircraft and are descending toward the ocean. Impact in approximately 10 minutes. I am engaging hostiles. Request emergency landing vectors for after I regain control of the aircraft. Silence on the other end. Then frantic radio chatter, multiple voices talking over each other. Did she say Reaper? Commander Torres? Is that? Run voice recognition now. Check the passenger manifest. Holy shit, it's actually her. A new voice cut through the chaos, calm and authoritative. Squadron leader, Elena recognized. She'd worked with enough of them to know the tone. Commander Torres, this is Black Hawk lead. We have your aircraft on radar. Can you confirm you are actually aboard Flight 628? Affirmative, Black Hawk lead. And you're planning to engage 3 armed hostiles alone on a commercial aircraft full of civilians? I don't have a choice. They're crashing the plane. Current descent rate will put us in the water in 9 minutes. Commander, we can't authorize. I'm not asking for authorization, Elena said, her voice hard. I'm retired. I'm a civilian now. I'm just letting you know what's about to happen so you can prepare emergency vectors and notify Navy Command. Commander Torres. Have the nearest carrier group prepare for emergency landing. I'll regain control of the aircraft, but the pilots may be injured. I may need to talk them through landing procedures. The nearest carrier is USS Abraham Lincoln, 180 miles from your current position. Perfect. Have them turn into the wind and prepare recovery operations. I'll contact you again after I've neutralized the hostiles. Torres out. She took off the headset and set it down carefully on the galley counter. Her hands still weren't shaking. Her heartbeat was steady. Her breathing was controlled. This was familiar territory. This was what she'd trained for 12 years. This was muscle memory and instinct and skills honed through hundreds of hours of practice and dozens of real-world operations. This was what Commander Elena Torres did. This was what Reaper did. She closed her eyes for just a moment. Said a silent goodbye to the peaceful life she'd been trying to build. The marine biologist. The quiet researcher. The woman who studied coral reefs and wrote papers and lived without violence. That woman was gone now. Maybe she'd never really existed. Elena opened her eyes, and they were cold and focused and absolutely certain. Reaper was back. Elena moved through the galley area like a shadow, silent and purposeful. Her mind was completely clear now, running through the tactical situation with the cold precision of 12 years of combat experience. 3 hostiles. 1 in the cockpit with the pilots. 2 in the cabin. Cockpit hostile was the priority target. Take him out first, silently, before the other 2 realized what was happening. Then move fast before they could react. She needed a weapon. Her eyes scanned the galley quickly. Knives, but they were small, designed for cutting fruit and opening packages. Not ideal but better than nothing. Then she saw it. A coffee pot, full of hot coffee. And next to it, a wine bottle from the beverage cart. Improvised weapons. She'd trained with worse. But then she remembered, the first hijacker in the cockpit would have a ceramic knife. The kind that could pass through metal detectors. Sharp, lethal, and much better than a coffee pot. She just had to take it from him first. Elena moved toward the cockpit, staying low, using the seats and bulkheads for cover. The 2 hijackers in the first-class cabin were focused on the passengers, shouting threats, waving their plastic guns. They never saw her slip past. The cockpit door was open. Through the gap, she could see the hijacker standing behind the pilots, his ceramic knife pressed against the captain's throat. Both pilots had their hands zip-tied behind their backs, but they were still in their seats, forced to watch as the aircraft descended toward the ocean. The altimeter read 26,000 feet. Descending at 2,000 feet per minute. 7 minutes until impact. The hijacker was focused on the instruments, watching the altitude drop, probably imagining the glory of his martyrdom. He was young, maybe 26, with a thin beard and wild eyes. He never heard Elena approach from behind. She moved in one fluid motion, her left hand coming up to control his knife hand, her right hand finding the correct position on his head and neck. The technique was called a cervical fracture displacement, a violent rotation that severed the spinal cord at the C1, C2 vertebrae. Instant death. Completely silent. The hijacker's body went limp in her arms. She controlled his fall, lowering him gently to the cockpit floor so the body wouldn't make noise and alert the other 2. The ceramic knife was still in his hand. Elena took it, feeling the weight, testing the balance. Good blade. 7 inches long, wickedly sharp. The captain and first officer were staring at her with wide, shocked eyes. Their faces were bruised, they'd fought back during the initial attack. The captain had a nasty cut above his left eye, and the first officer's lip was split and swollen. Elena put a finger to her lips. Silence. Stay quiet. The captain nodded slowly, understanding. Elena checked the zip ties on their wrists. Standard plastic restraints, tight but not impossible to remove. She'd need scissors or a knife to cut them free, but that would have to wait. First, she had to deal with the other 2 hijackers. She moved back toward the cockpit door, listening carefully. The 2 hijackers in first class were still shouting at passengers. One of them was making announcements over the intercom, reveling in the fear he was causing. 6 minutes, he shouted gleefully. 6 minutes until we reach the ocean. Your Western technology cannot save you now. Your military cannot save you. Only God decides who lives and dies, and He has chosen death for all of us. The passengers screamed and cried. Elena waited for the right moment. The second hijacker, the one in the fake business suit, started walking down the aisle toward economy class, probably to make sure no one was trying to use their phones or cause problems. He was walking away from his partner. Separating from him. Mistake. Elena emerged from the cockpit area, moving fast and low. The hijacker in the tourist outfit was standing near the front of first class, his back to her, holding his plastic gun with both hands and shouting threats. She threw the ceramic knife. 12 years of training. Hundreds of hours of practice. The blade rotated exactly 1.5 times before the point buried itself in the soft tissue of his throat, just below the Adam's apple. The hijacker made a wet, gurgling sound. His hands went to his throat, trying to pull out the knife, trying to scream, but only blood came out. He staggered backward and collapsed into a seat, his eyes wide with shock and terror. Blood spread across his white tourist shirt in a growing red stain. The passengers near him screamed and scrambled away. The third hijacker, the one in the business suit, halfway down the economy aisle, heard the screaming and spun around. He saw his partner dying in the first-class cabin. Saw the blood. Saw Elena standing there, her hands empty but her eyes absolutely cold and focused. For a moment, he froze, unable to process what he was seeing. Just a woman. A small woman in khaki field clothes. How could she have? Then understanding hit him, and his face twisted with rage. "Bitch," he roared in Arabic, and charged toward her, pulling a box cutter from his pocket. This was the hard part. Elena had no weapon now, the ceramic knife was buried in the second hijacker's throat. And this third one was young, strong, and running on adrenaline and religious fervor. Plus the fight would happen in a narrow aircraft aisle with terrified passengers on both sides. But Elena Torres had been in worse situations. The hijacker came at her fast, slashing with the box cutter in wide, wild arcs. Untrained. Angry. Predictable. Elena stepped back, letting him overextend his reach, then deflected his arm to the side and drove her elbow into his face with all the force she could generate in the confined space. His nose shattered with a wet crunch. Blood exploded across his face. He bellowed in pain and rage, but kept coming. The box cutter sliced across Elena's left shoulder. She felt the burn of the blade cutting through her shirt and into her skin, felt warm blood start to flow. Ignored it. The hijacker lunged again, trying to stab the box cutter into her chest. Elena caught his wrist with both hands, twisted hard in a direction wrists weren't meant to bend. Bones snapped. The hijacker screamed and dropped the box cutter from his right hand, but immediately reached for it with his left. Elena was faster. She kicked the box cutter away, sending it skittering down the aisle under the seats. The hijacker, his face a mask of blood from his shattered nose, his right wrist broken and dangling uselessly, should have given up. He didn't. He was a true believer. He'd been promised paradise. He was willing to die. He charged at her again, trying to tackle her to the ground, trying to choke her with his one good hand. Elena sidestepped, grabbed his head as he passed, and used his own momentum to slam his face into the metal edge of a seat armrest. More blood. More screaming from passengers. The hijacker staggered but stayed on his feet. His face was completely covered in blood now, his nose crushed, probably multiple teeth broken. But he kept coming. Elena drove her knee into his groin with brutal force. He doubled over, gasping, and she brought her elbow down on the back of his neck. He went to his knees on the aircraft floor, still trying to get up, still trying to fight. Elena grabbed his head with both hands, positioned herself correctly, and executed the same cervical fracture technique she'd used on the first hijacker. The sharp crack was audible even over the screaming passengers. The third hijacker's body went limp and collapsed face down in the aisle. Elena stood there, breathing hard, her left shoulder bleeding heavily from the box cutter wound. She could feel blood running down her arm, soaking into her sleeve. She looked down at her hands. They were covered in blood, some hers, some from the hijacker's shattered nose. Around her, 300 people sat in absolute stunned silence, staring at her. The entire fight had lasted 90 seconds. 3 hijackers. All dead. Elena staggered slightly, grabbing a seat back for support. The adrenaline was fading now, and the pain was setting in. The shoulder wound was bad, she could feel it was deep, could feel the muscle had been cut. She also realized she'd taken other cuts during the fight that she hadn't even noticed. Her right forearm had a long slash from the box cutter. And there was a deep cut across her ribs on her left side. She didn't even remember when that had happened. Blood was soaking through her shirt in multiple places. The young flight attendant, Patricia, rushed forward, her face pale but determined. "Oh my God, you're bleeding. We need to stop the bleeding, we need to." "Get the pilots untied," Elena said through gritted teeth, her voice tight with pain. "Need them in the cockpit immediately. The plane is still descending." Patricia nodded and ran toward the first-class galley where the scissors were kept. Elena forced herself to move, one foot in front of the other, using the seats for support. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges. Blood loss. Not critical yet, but getting there. She made it to the cockpit and collapsed into the jump seat, breathing hard. The captain and first officer were free now, Patricia having cut through their zip ties. They were both staring at the dead hijacker on the cockpit floor. "Push him out of the way," Elena said. "We don't have time." The first officer grabbed the body's legs and dragged it to the side of the cockpit, his face green with nausea. The captain scrambled into his seat and grabbed the controls. "Where are we?" he gasped, his hands shaking on the yoke. Elena forced her eyes to focus on the instruments. 22,000 feet. Still descending at 2,000 feet per minute. "You need to level us out and then climb." The captain tried to pull back on the yoke, but his hands were shaking too badly. His eyes kept losing focus, his head swaying slightly. Concussion. The beating he'd taken from the hijackers had given him a serious concussion. I can't see straight, the instruments are blurry." The first officer reached for the controls with his right hand, then cried out in pain and pulled back. His wrist was swollen to twice its normal size, already turning purple. "My wrist, I think it's broken, I can't move it." Elena looked at them both. Looked at the altimeter, the numbers still dropping. 20,000 feet. 19,000. The ocean was getting closer every second. She looked down at herself. Blood soaking through her shirt from multiple wounds. Her left arm was starting to go numb, the shoulder wound had probably cut through nerve tissue. But she was still conscious. Still thinking. Still functioning. "Okay," she said, her voice steady despite the pain. "Okay. I'll talk you through it." "Captain, listen to my voice," Elena said, forcing authority and calm into her tone despite the pain screaming through her shoulder and ribs. "Forget the instruments for a moment. Just feel the aircraft. Tell me what you feel." The captain took a shaky breath. "Nose down. Descending. Engines at 70% power. Good. Now I need you to do exactly what I say. Throttle up first. Push the throttles forward with your right hand. Don't look at anything. Just push them forward until I tell you to stop." The captain's hand fumbled for the throttle levers. Found them. Pushed forward. The engines roared louder as power increased. "Keep going," Elena said. 85%. 90%. There. Hold it there. Throttles at 90%, the captain confirmed. "Good. Now, first officer, can you use your left hand on the autopilot panel?" The first officer looked at his left hand like he'd forgotten it existed. Yes, I think so." "Don't think. You can do it. I need you to reach over and engage the autopilot. Set heading to 090, that's due east. And set altitude hold at current altitude." The first officer's left hand shook as he reached across his body to the autopilot controls. His right wrist was cradled against his chest, swollen and useless. "I've got it, engaging autopilot, heading 090, altitude hold." The aircraft shuddered slightly as the autopilot kicked in, fighting the downward descent. "Altitude 18,000 feet, the captain said. His voice was getting weaker. Still descending but slower now. Elena could feel it through the seat. The aircraft was fighting to level out, the autopilot trying to hold altitude against the momentum of the dive. "You're doing good," she said. "The aircraft wants to level out. Let it. Don't fight the controls." Blood dripped from her fingertips onto the cockpit floor. Patricia was behind her, pressing emergency bandages against the worst wounds, but there was too much blood, too many cuts. "Altitude 17,500, the captain said. "Descent rate slowing, 1,000 feet per minute, 500. "That's it," Elena said. "Let the autopilot do its work. Altitude 17,000. Leveling out, we're leveling out." The aircraft shuddered again, then the descent stopped. The artificial horizon on the instruments showed level flight. "We're level," the first officer said, his voice cracking with relief. "Altitude 17,000 feet, holding steady." Elena let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Good. Now we need to climb. Captain, I need you to adjust the autopilot altitude setting. Set it to 25,000 feet." The captain's hands moved to the autopilot panel. His movements were slow, clumsy, but he found the right controls. Altitude set to 25,000. The aircraft's nose came up slightly as the autopilot began to climb. Behind Elena, Patricia was still working on the bandages. "You've lost a lot of blood," she said quietly. "You need a hospital." "Later," Elena said. "Right now I need to get this plane down safely." She reached for the radio headset, her bloody hand leaving red smears on the equipment. "Black Hawk lead, this is Torres. Hostiles neutralized. Aircraft under control. Climbing to 25,000 feet." The response was immediate, "Commander Torres. Status of pilots. Captain has a concussion, limited vision and focus. First officer has a broken right wrist. Both injured but conscious. I'm going to need help getting this aircraft on the ground." "Copy that. What's your status, Commander?" Elena looked down at herself. 3 major lacerations, multiple minor cuts, significant blood loss. Her left arm was almost completely numb now. "I'm functional," she said simply. "USS Abraham Lincoln is preparing for emergency recovery operations. They're at bearing 175, distance 170 miles from your current position. Can you make it there?" Elena did the math in her head. At current speed, about 40 minutes of flight time. Could she stay conscious for 40 more minutes? She had to. "Affirmative. Send me the approach vectors." "Commander, are you qualified for carrier landing?" "Emergency pilot cert from SEAL training." "I've never actually landed on a carrier." A long pause on the radio. Then, "Commander, carrier landing is one of the most difficult aviation procedures in the world. Veteran Navy pilots train for years." "I'm aware," Elena said, cutting him off. "But it's this or we ditch in the ocean. You have a better option?" Another pause. "No, ma'am. Stand by for vectors." "And Commander?" "The air boss on Lincoln wants me to tell you that you're insane." "Tell the air boss he's probably right," Elena said. "But I'm all these people have." She turned to the captain. "How are you feeling?" "Dizzy. Nauseous. Everything's blurry. Definitely a concussion. Probably a serious one. He might lose consciousness before they reached the carrier." First officer. "Pain is bad, but I can handle it. I can work the radios and systems with my left hand." "Good. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to guide both of you through flying this aircraft to the carrier. Captain, you're going to stay on the controls as long as you can. If you pass out, I'll take over. First officer, you manage all the systems, landing gear, flaps, everything except the actual flying." "Understood." Both men nodded. One more thing, Elena said. Carrier landings are violent. Nothing like a normal runway landing. We're going to hit that deck hard. Make sure all passengers are secured with seatbelts tight. Make sure the flight attendants know to brace for impact. Patricia nodded and rushed out of the cockpit to inform the other crew members. Elena leaned back in the jump seat, trying to conserve her energy. 40 minutes to the carrier. Then the hardest landing she'd ever attempt. She closed her eyes for just a moment. Yemen. The explosion. Her teammates' faces. She'd failed them. She couldn't fail these people. 35 minutes later, USS Abraham Lincoln appeared on the horizon. From 25,000 feet, the massive nuclear-powered aircraft carrier looked like a toy boat on the endless blue Pacific. But as they descended, it grew larger, more real. And more terrifying. The carrier deck was less than 1,100 feet long. The Boeing 777 needed at least 5,000 feet of runway for a normal landing. This was going to be insane. Elena was in the captain's seat now. The captain had passed out 15 minutes ago, slumped in the first officer's seat with a blanket over him. The concussion had been too severe. He'd held on as long as he could. Now it was just Elena, flying with one hand while her injured arm hung useless at her side. The bleeding had slowed but hadn't stopped. She'd lost a dangerous amount of blood. Her vision kept tunneling at the edges, narrowing to a dark circle. She forced herself to stay focused. Forced herself to breathe steadily. Forced herself to ignore the pain. The first officer sat next to her, managing systems with his left hand, his broken right wrist secured in a makeshift sling. Flight 628, this is Lincoln Approach Control, a calm Navy voice said over the radio. We have you on radar. Begin descent to 3,000 feet, reduce speed to 200 knots, heading 180. Elena's hand on the yoke was slippery with blood. She wiped it on her pants, already soaked with blood, and pulled back the throttles. The aircraft descended smoothly. So far, everything was working. But the actual landing would be completely different from anything she'd practiced. Commander Torres, this is Admiral Kensington aboard Lincoln. A new voice, older, authoritative. I understand you've never performed a carrier landing. That's correct, sir. Then let me be absolutely clear about what you're about to attempt. This is the hardest thing you will ever do. Carrier landings are controlled crashes. You don't float the aircraft down gently like on a runway. You drive it into the deck. The tail hook needs to catch one of 4 arresting wires stretched across the deck. Catch a wire, and you stop in 300 feet. Miss all 4 wires, and you go straight into the ocean. There is no second chance. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good. My landing signal officer will talk you through every step. His name is Lieutenant Commander Harris, and he's landed thousands of aircraft on carriers. Listen to every word he says. Don't improvise. Don't try to be clever. Just follow instructions exactly. Can you do that? Elena thought about 12 years in the SEALs. Thought about following orders in the middle of chaos and gunfire. Thought about trust and discipline and doing exactly what you were trained to do even when every instinct screamed otherwise. I can do that, sir. Outstanding. Harris, she's all yours. A new voice, younger but completely confident. Flight 628, this is Lieutenant Commander Harris, landing signal officer. I'll be talking you down. First things first, how are you feeling? Functional, Elena said, which was only partially a lie. Good enough. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to line up with the deck on heading 180. You'll see a set of lights on the left side of the landing area. We call it the Fresnel lens optical landing system, or just, the ball. Green lights mean you're too high, red lights mean you're too low. You want to keep the amber ball in the center. Can you see it yet? Elena squinted through the windscreen. The carrier was maybe 5 miles away now. She could just barely make out a pattern of lights on the deck. I see it. Perfect. Your approach speed needs to be exactly 140 knots. Not faster, not slower. The deck is moving forward at 30 knots, so your relative closing speed will be 110. That's going to feel very slow, very uncomfortable. You're going to think you're about to stall. Ignore that feeling. Trust the instruments. Trust me. Understood. At 1 mile out, you'll be at 200 feet altitude. At a quarter mile, you'll be at 50 feet, that's going to feel terrifyingly low over the water. When I call, cut throttle, you're going to pull the throttles to idle immediately. The aircraft will drop hard. Let it. Do not try to flare like a normal landing. The nose stays down. You want to slam the main gear onto the deck first, then the nose gear. The tail hook will catch the wire. You'll go from 110 knots to 0 in about 3 seconds. It's going to be violent. Everyone gets thrown forward hard. That's normal. Elena's head was swimming. Too many numbers, too many instructions. She forced herself to focus. Say back the key points, Harris said. Speed 140 knots. Keep the ball centered. Don't flare. Let it drop hard. Main gear first. Perfect. One more thing, Commander. This aircraft wasn't designed for carrier landings. Your tail hook isn't as robust as Navy aircraft. You get one shot at this. One pass. If you don't catch a wire, you're going into the ocean. There's no going around for another try. So make it count. Understood. All right. Let's bring you home. Reduce to 140 knots and start your descent. Elena pulled the throttles back carefully. The speed decreased, 180 knots, 170, 160, 150, 145, 140. Speed 140, the first officer confirmed, watching the instruments. Altitude 3,000 feet, descending. The carrier was growing larger. Elena could see the deck clearly now, see the tiny figures of sailors in colored jerseys running around preparing for recovery operations. Yellow jerseys for aircraft handlers. Red for ordnance and crash crews. Purple for fuel. Green for maintenance. All of them watching her approach. All of them knowing she'd never done this before. Flight 628, you're 2 miles out, looking good. Descend to 500 feet. Elena pushed the yoke forward gently. The ocean rose up to meet them, terrifyingly close. 500 feet, the first officer said quietly. Speed still 140. 1 mile out, Harris said. Descend to 200 feet. Watch the ball. You're slightly high. Come down 50 feet. Elena's hands were shaking now. The ocean was so close she could see individual waves. If she misjudged this, if she came in too low, they'd hit the water before reaching the deck. 200 feet. Speed 140. Looking good. You're on glide slope. Half mile out. Descend to 100 feet. Down again. The carrier deck filled her entire windscreen now. She could see the arresting wires stretched across it, could see the landing area marked in white paint. 100 feet. The first officer's voice was tight with fear now. They were so low that the aircraft's shadow was visible on the ocean surface. Quarter mile. Call the ball. Ball centered, Elena said, her voice surprisingly steady. Good. Maintain speed, maintain glide slope. You're coming in perfect. 200 yards. The carrier deck rushing toward them. Cut throttle now. Elena's hand slammed the throttles to idle. The engines went quiet. The aircraft dropped like a stone. Every instinct in her body screamed to pull back on the yoke, to raise the nose, to soften the landing. She forced her hands to stay steady. Let it drop. Let it crash. The deck rushed up impossibly fast. 100 yards. 50 yards. Don't flare. Harris shouted. 20 yards. 10. The main landing gear hit the carrier deck with a tremendous bang that shook the entire aircraft. Metal screamed. The fuselage shuddered violently. Then the tail hook caught the second arresting wire. The deceleration was brutal. Elena was thrown forward against her seatbelt so hard that the air was driven from her lungs. Her head snapped forward. Stars exploded across her vision. Behind her, in the cabin, passengers screamed as they were thrown against their seatbelts. Overhead bins popped open. Someone's bag flew down the aisle. But the aircraft was stopping. The arresting wire was doing its job, dragging them to a halt with brutal efficiency. 3 seconds after touching down, the Boeing 777 came to a complete stop. Dead center on the carrier deck. Flight 628, you are aboard, Harris said, and his voice was filled with amazement. Shut down engines. You did it, Commander. You actually did it. Elena's hands moved automatically through the shutdown procedures. Engines off. Systems off. Brake set. We're down, she whispered. We're safe. She tried to unbuckle her seatbelt. Tried to stand up. Tried to turn around to check on the passengers. The cockpit spun. Her vision went black. She heard the first officer shouting something. Heard Patricia screaming for medical help. Then nothing. Elena woke up to white ceiling tiles and the steady beep of medical monitors. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Hospital. But the ceiling was moving slightly, swaying with a gentle rocking motion. Ship. She was on a ship. The carrier. USS Abraham Lincoln. Memory came flooding back. The hijacking. The fight. The landing. The passengers. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain exploded through her shoulder and ribs. Her entire body felt like it had been beaten with hammers. Easy, Commander. A calm voice. A Navy corpsman appeared at her bedside, gently pushing her back down. You've been through surgery. You need to rest. The passengers? Elena's voice was hoarse, her throat dry. All safe. All 287 passengers and all crew members. Thanks to you. Relief flooded through her so intensely that tears sprang to her eyes. They were safe. She'd done it. She hadn't failed them. How long have I been out? 3 days. You lost a lot of blood. The shoulder wound was deep, cut through muscle and nicked an artery. You needed 18 stitches. The forearm took another 12. The ribs took 22. Plus 2 units of blood. 3 days. She'd been unconscious for 3 days. There's someone here to see you, the corpsman said. He's been waiting. An older man in a Navy admiral's uniform stepped into view. 4 stars on his collar. Admiral Kensington, she realized. The carrier group commander. Commander Torres, he said, and his voice was filled with respect. Welcome back. Sir. Elena tried to salute from her hospital bed, but her injured arm wouldn't cooperate. At ease, Commander. You've earned the right to skip the formalities. He sat down in a chair beside her bed. I wanted to personally thank you for what you did. You saved 287 civilian lives. You eliminated 3 armed terrorists in close-quarters combat aboard a commercial aircraft, one of the most difficult operational environments imaginable. And you executed a carrier landing that veteran Navy pilots trained for years to accomplish. All while suffering from multiple severe injuries and significant blood loss. I just did what anyone would have. No. The Admiral's voice was firm. Not anyone. You. You're one of maybe 10 people in the world who could have done what you did. And that's why the Navy wants you back. Elena closed her eyes. She'd known this was coming. I'm retired, sir. I know. And I read your file. I know about Yemen. I know about the teammates you lost. I know why you left. He leaned forward. But Elena, what you did on that aircraft proves you're still one of the best operators in the world. The SEAL community needs you. We need your skills, your experience, your leadership. I don't want to kill anymore, sir. You saved lives. That's what you did. Yes, you had to kill 3 terrorists to do it. But you saved 287 innocent people. Children. Families. That mother with the baby, she gets to watch her daughter grow up because of you. That elderly couple, they get to spend their final years together because of you. Elena opened her eyes and looked at him. I know. And I'm glad I could save them. But that doesn't mean I want to go back to that life permanently. The Admiral studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I understand. What if it wasn't permanent? What if you consulted? Taught? Shared your knowledge with the next generation of SEALs without having to go operational yourself? Consulting? We need people who've been there, who've done it. People who can teach hostage rescue, tactical decision-making, staying calm under impossible pressure. You could teach at the Naval Special Warfare Center. Help train the new SEAL candidates. Especially the women, there aren't many female SEALs yet, and the ones coming through need mentors who understand what they're facing. Elena thought about it. Teaching. Passing on knowledge. Helping the next generation be better, smarter, safer than she'd been. Not killing. Not fighting. Just teaching. I could do that, she said slowly. Part-time. I'm still working on my marine biology degree. Part-time works. 3 days a week. You teach at Coronado, then spend the rest of your time studying your fish. Despite the pain, Elena smiled slightly. That could work. Good. The Admiral stood up. When you're recovered, we'll make it official. For now, you've got some visitors who've been asking to see you. Passengers from Flight 628. Are you up for that? Yes, sir. I'll send them in. He paused at the door. One more thing, Commander. Your actions on that flight are all over the news. Ex-Navy SEAL saves Flight 628. You're famous. I hope you're ready for that. Elena groaned. I really didn't want to be famous. Too late. You're a hero, Elena. Accept it. He left. They came in one at a time, at first. The young mother was first. She was carrying her baby, the little girl in the pink onesie with the teddy bear. The baby was awake now, looking around with wide, curious eyes, completely unaware of how close she'd come to dying. Commander Torres, the mother said softly, approaching the bed. I'm Sarah. This is my daughter, Emma. Elena felt tears burning in her eyes again. The baby was alive. Healthy. Safe. Hi, Emma, she whispered. I just wanted to say thank you, Sarah said, her own voice breaking. You saved my daughter's life. You saved me. When those men said we were going to crash, I thought Emma would never get to grow up. Never go to school. Never learn to walk or talk or. She couldn't continue. Tears were streaming down her face. She's going to have a whole life now, Sarah managed to say. She's going to grow up and go to kindergarten and maybe play soccer and go to college and fall in love and have her own children someday. She gets all of that because you were on that plane. Because you decided to act when everyone else was frozen with fear. The young mother leaned down carefully and kissed Elena's forehead. Thank you. Thank you for giving her a future. She left before Elena could respond, probably because she was crying too hard to speak. Next came the elderly couple. They walked slowly, supporting each other, their wrinkled hands clasped together. They had to be in their mid-70s at least. "We're John and Margaret Watson," the old man said in a gentle voice. "We were in seats 23A and B. "I remember you," Elena said. "You were holding hands." Margaret's eyes were wet with tears. "We thought we were going to die together. We'd made our peace with it. 73 years old, married for 52 years. We were going to die in the Pacific Ocean and our children would never even be able to bury us. But you gave us more time," John said, his voice thick with emotion. "We get to see our grandchildren again. Our daughter is having another baby in 4 months, our first great-grandchild. We get to meet her because you were brave enough to act. We get to celebrate our 53rd anniversary next month," Margaret added. "We're going to renew our vows. And we're going to toast to you, the woman who gave us more time together." They both leaned down and hugged her carefully, mindful of her injuries. Elena could smell Margaret's lavender perfume, could feel John's weathered hand patting her shoulder gently. "You showed me what real courage is," Margaret whispered. "Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. You were terrified, I could see it in your eyes. But you stood up anyway." They left, still holding hands, still supporting each other. The teenage girl came in last. She was maybe 16, wearing jeans and a T-shirt with some band logo on it. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was smiling. "Hi," she said nervously. "I'm Ashley. I was in seat 27F. "I remember," Elena said gently. "You were on the phone with your parents." Ashley nodded and sat down in the chair the Admiral had used. "I was saying goodbye. I really thought I was going to die. I'm only 16. I haven't even graduated high school yet. I was so scared." She wiped her eyes. "And then I saw you stand up. Everyone else was crying or praying or frozen with fear. But you just stood up and walked to the front of the plane like it was nothing. Like you weren't scared at all." "I was scared," Elena said quietly. "But you did it anyway. And I watched you fight those men. You were so strong. So fast. So powerful." Ashley leaned forward. "My mom always tells me that girls have to be careful. That the world is dangerous for women. That I should avoid risks, stay safe, let men handle dangerous situations. But you showed me that's wrong." "Your mom isn't wrong about the world being dangerous," Elena said carefully. "But she's wrong about what women can do." "That's what I told her," Ashley said, her eyes bright. "After we landed, I called her and I said, 'A woman saved us. A woman fought 3 terrorists and won. A woman landed the plane on an aircraft carrier. Women can do anything.'" Elena smiled despite the pain. "Women can do anything. But Ashley, listen to me. Being strong doesn't mean you have to fight. Being brave doesn't mean you can't be careful. I spent 12 years learning how to hurt people, and I'm not proud of that. What I'm proud of is that I used those skills to save people when it mattered. That's what I want to do," Ashley said firmly. "I want to help people. Maybe I'll join the military. Maybe I'll become a doctor. I don't know yet. But I know I want to be strong like you. I want to be someone who stands up when everyone else is frozen." "Then you will be," Elena said. "And you'll be better than me. Because you'll learn from my mistakes." Ashley stood up and hugged her, gently, carefully. "Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for showing me what's possible." After she left, Elena lay back against the pillow, exhausted but also, something else. Peaceful, maybe. For 3 days, she'd been tormented by what she'd done. 3 more kills. 3 more deaths on her conscience. 3 more faces to see in her nightmares. But Sarah's baby was alive. John and Margaret would see their great-grandchild. Ashley would grow up and do amazing things. 287 people were alive because Elena had chosen to act. Maybe that was worth the cost. Maybe saving lives didn't require abandoning who she was. Maybe it just required choosing when and how to use her skills. Maybe Reaper didn't have to mean death. Maybe it could mean protection. The research boat rocked gently in the waves off the California coast, about 15 miles from San Diego. Elena stood at the rail, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of orange and gold and purple. She'd been back to work as a marine biologist for 4 months now. The media attention had finally died down. She could go to the grocery store without being recognized. She could sit in a coffee shop and read without people asking for autographs or wanting to hear the story of Flight 628. Life had returned to something approaching normal. Except for Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. 3 days a week, she drove down to Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado and taught classes. Not combat tactics. Not killing techniques. She'd been very clear about that with Admiral Kensington. She taught decision-making under pressure. She taught situational awareness. She taught the mental aspects of being a warrior, how to handle the guilt, the trauma, the weight of lives depending on your choices. And she specifically taught classes for female SEAL candidates. There still weren't many women in the teams. The selection process was brutally difficult, designed to break even the strongest candidates. Most women who tried didn't make it. But the ones who did needed mentors. They needed someone who understood what they were facing, the doubt, the pressure, the constant need to prove themselves in a male-dominated field. Elena could be that for them. This morning, she'd spent 3 hours with a group of new recruits, taking them through scenarios based on what had happened on Flight 628. The hardest part isn't the physical action, she told them, standing in front of the classroom in her civilian clothes, cargo pants and a simple blue shirt. The fighting, the shooting, the tactics, you'll train for all of that until it's second nature. The hardest part is the decision. Knowing when to act and when to hold back. Understanding the cost of violence and accepting it when you have no choice. One of the recruits, a young woman named Shen, 24 years old, former college athlete, had raised her hand. "Ma'am, they call you Reaper. Does that bother you?" Elena had thought about it. 6 months ago, she would have said yes. The name had felt like a curse, a reminder of all the death she'd caused. But now. "It used to bother me," she'd said honestly. "I thought Reaper meant I was a bringer of death. That it defined me as a killer. But I understand it differently now." "How, ma'am?" "Reaper doesn't mean I love death," Elena had said, looking at each of the recruits in turn. "It means death comes for threats to innocent people. And I'm very good at delivering it when necessary. But the key words are, when necessary. Violence is a tool, not a solution. You use it only when every other option has failed. And when you do use it, you own the consequences. You live with what you've done. You don't glorify it or celebrate it. You treat it with the weight it deserves." The recruits had nodded, understanding. One of them had asked, "Do you regret what you did on Flight 628? Killing those 3 men?" Elena had considered the question carefully before answering. "I regret that it was necessary," she'd said finally. "I regret that 3 men made choices that led to their deaths. I regret that the world has people in it who are willing to murder innocent civilians for political or religious reasons. But do I regret stopping them? No. I don't regret saving 287 lives." Now, standing on the research boat watching the sunset, Elena thought about those words. She'd meant them. For the first time since Yemen, she was at peace with who she was. Not just a warrior. Not just a scientist. Both. She could be both. She could spend her mornings studying coral reefs and her afternoons teaching the next generation of warriors. She could love peace and still be prepared for violence. She could be gentle with fish and lethal with terrorists. The quiet marine biologist in seat 14C. The most dangerous person on the plane. Both were Elena Torres. Both were real. Her radio crackled on her belt. "Elena, this is Captain Morrison at Special Warfare Command. We have a situation." She unclipped the radio, her heart rate automatically increasing slightly. Old instincts. What kind of situation? Pirates have taken a cargo ship off the coast of Somalia. 23 crew members held hostage. They're asking for SEAL support for the rescue operation. They want to know if you'd be willing to consult on the mission planning. Somalia. Just like the mission that had earned her the call sign Reaper all those years ago. Consult, she said carefully. Not go operational. Just consult. They need someone with hostage rescue experience to help plan the approach. Your expertise. Not your trigger finger. Elena looked out at the peaceful ocean. Looked at her research equipment on the boat. Looked at the beautiful sunset. Then she thought about 23 sailors trapped on a ship, terrified, waiting for rescue. Wondering if anyone was coming. Wondering if they'd ever see their families again. Just like the journalists in Somalia all those years ago. Just like the passengers on Flight 628. People who needed help. People who needed someone with the skills and knowledge to save them. "Send me the mission details," she said into the radio. "I'll review them tonight and have recommendations by tomorrow morning." "Thank you, Commander." "I'm not coming back full-time," Elena said firmly. "I'm still retired. This is consulting only." "Understood. We just need your brain, not your gun." Elena smiled slightly as she clipped the radio back to her belt. Just her brain. Just her knowledge and experience, used to help plan a mission that would save lives. That felt right. That felt like the balance she'd been looking for. Her research assistant, a graduate student named David who was working on his PhD, looked over at her from where he was recording water samples. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Everything's fine," Elena said. "Just some people who need help with a problem." "Navy stuff?" "Yeah. Navy stuff." David nodded and went back to his samples. He knew Elena consulted for the military part-time. He didn't know the details, and he didn't ask. He was a good kid. As the research boat turned toward shore, Elena took one last look at the ocean. The sun was setting behind them, turning the sky into a masterpiece of color. The water was calm and peaceful. Somewhere below the surface, fish swam through coral reefs, living their quiet lives, unaware of the human dramas playing out above. Beautiful. Peaceful. Perfect. But somewhere in the world, people were in danger. People needed help. People needed someone with the skills and knowledge to save them. And Elena Torres had decided she could be both things. The woman who studied life. And the woman who protected it. Call sign Reaper never truly retired, she realized. She just learned to be selective about when she answered the call. Because the world needed warriors. Not warriors who loved violence, but warriors who understood that sometimes violence was the only way to protect the innocent. Warriors who could be gentle and fierce. Peaceful and lethal. Scientists and soldiers. Warriors like Elena Torres. She was learning to live with that now. Learning to accept both parts of herself. Learning that being Reaper didn't mean she loved death, it meant she was willing to stand between death and the innocent. And sometimes, that was exactly what the world needed. The quiet woman reading a book in seat 14C. The most dangerous person on the plane. The warrior who wanted peace but kept her skills sharp for the moment when peace wasn't enough. Reaper. She wore that name now without shame. Because it wasn't a curse. It was a promise. A promise that innocent people would never be alone. That someone would stand up when others froze. That death would come for those who threatened the defenseless. And Elena Torres was very, very good at keeping her promises.